On today's episode of the Ranveer Show, we have another all-star that returns. It's Abhijit Chavda, and today we're talking about geopolitics. In his own words, geopolitics is a sport that contains no rules, but the objective is world domination. You know, when you read about world news and you see what the world is reporting, the underlying layers of the world that are being affected are the geopolitical layers. And that's what this video is about. Basically, if you're someone who's sort of missed out on the last 20 to 50 years of what's happened on a world stage, I feel like this podcast will help you to stay updated. It'll help open your eyes about what's happening out there. How does India view the world? How does the world view India? And who are the real superpowers of this world? The Ranveer Show is now a Spotify exclusive. Remember to follow TRS on Spotify for stimulating conversations just like this. Every episode is available on Spotify 48 hours before it's available anywhere else in the world. But for now, we've got Abhijit Chavda on the Ranveer Show. Once again, today's topic is one of the most stimulating topics in the world: geopolitics. You know, when Abhijit Chavda is on any version of the Ranveer Show, we got an explosion of information. Thank you for being here again, sir.
Thank you for having me, sir.
I don't even know where to start this particular topic, but what I will start with is context. Lots of people follow national news, get engulfed in politics and engulfed in their own political opinions, and kind of overlook what's happening in the world. What's happening on a worldwide scale? Where is the world going? Where is the world of world economics going? What's happening in terms of business? What's happening in terms of how one country is looking at other countries? What's happening in terms of the future of mankind? For anyone who's missed out on the last 10 years of the world and wants to know what's going to happen in the next 10 years, this episode is for you. Lots of learnings. Of course, we're going to talk from a historical context. Abhijit Chavda, welcome to the Ranveer Show again.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
The third recording out of many that we will end up doing, sir. I don't even know where to start this conversation because I feel you're the expert on geopolitics. So I remember calling you a few days ago and I asked you, so what do you want to specifically talk about? And the first topic you said is, let's do geopolitics.
Yes.
But instead, I said, no, can we also try astrophysics? Can we also try ancient India? And you said, cool. And you gave me possibly two of my best episodes ever recorded. So I'm excited about this one.
So let's begin by defining what geopolitics is.
Yeah.
So geopolitics is a sport.
Okay.
Okay. And you make up the rules as you go. It's a competition for the resources that are available to humanity on our planet or maybe beyond that, if we can reach there. So the actors are the major powers on the world stage. And the tools are diplomacy, economics, lawfare, warfare, hard power, soft power, everything you can imagine. Espionage, sabotage, terrorism, guerrilla warfare, anything you can imagine, everything you can imagine is a part of your toolkit in geopolitics. It's about realism. It's about realpolitik. There is no place for idealism in this. You have to know what your national interest is. You need to have a clearly defined set of objectives and a clearly defined doctrine about how you want to achieve those objectives. And may the strongest power win. So it's all about power, various forms of power. What is your comprehensive national power? How do you increase that? And often it becomes a zero-sum game. So you gain at the expense of somebody else. There are economic tools that you use. Mercantilism, for example.
What is that?
Mercantilism is essentially you grow your economic stature at the expense of everybody else. Beggar thy neighbor. Using lawful economic means. For example, you import raw materials from a country, from all the countries around you, and you export finished goods. So you get raw materials very cheap because that's just resources, right? But the thing you export, finished goods, they're going to be of higher value. So over time, your GDP grows, everybody else's goes down.
Like what China is doing.
This is precisely what China has been doing for the past 20, 30 years, aided and abetted by the US unwittingly.
But it's good business at its core.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like there's some businessmen sitting in China who thought of this, and cool. If it helps geopolitics, great.
It's warfare by any means possible, by non-military, non-kinetic means. And that's how you can take over the world without firing a single shot. China is an extremely risk-averse country, which is something we don't get because they act so aggressive. They behave very aggressively. China has been historically an extraordinarily risk-averse country.
Like they don't want to take risks.
They do not want to take risks. This is something you will perceive only if you study history. So let me go into that. If you look at the past 2,000 years, 2,500 years of Chinese history, you must have heard of Sun Tzu, right? The great Chinese strategist.
Lao Tzu, Sun Tzu.
Sun Tzu was the military strategist. He wrote a little booklet called The Art of War.
Yeah.
So he was a Chinese general. He fought many wars and battles and military campaigns. Who were his enemies? His opponents were 100% Chinese. The Chinese have always fought each other. Okay. See, we play all these video games and all. China is shown as this nation of great warriors. But whom are they fighting? They're fighting each other. It's always been warring states periods, one kingdom against another. Song dynasty against another dynasty. This dynasty against that dynasty. It's always been like that. And whenever China has expanded beyond its borders militarily, it's always been when its neighbors have been extremely weak and disunited and divided. 1962, India was a hopelessly weak country. India did not bother to have a proper professional military. I would not say it was unprofessional, but it was very badly underfunded and very badly run by the politicians. So they will attack you when you're weak. They will never dare to attack a powerful country ever. In the past 2,500 years of Chinese history, they have never attacked a powerful neighboring country ever. And whenever a powerful country has invaded China, it's always ended in disaster for China. The Mongols took over China like a hurricane. In the 7th or 8th century CE, the Tibetans captured Beijing. Tibet took over the Chinese empire. Nobody remembers that because China doesn't want you to remember this. Recently, the Japanese, a little island, took over the whole of China.
In World War II?
In World War II. In 1975, I believe, the Chinese tried to invade Vietnam. They suffered a crushing defeat. So China, historically, has been an extremely risk-averse country. They will only try to fight you if you are weak. And whenever a strong country invades China, it's always been a loss for China. And this is something that the propaganda out there will not let you see. But this is the truth about China. And the other thing about China is that historically, over the past 2,000 years, China has been a Buddhist country, but its emperors have never been Buddhist. The governance has never been dharmic or Buddhist in nature. It's always been a combination of legalism and Confucianism. So Confucianism is a Chinese philosophy, which is an atheistic policy. And legalism is essentially ruled by whatever law you write, whatever laws you frame. So essentially, the emperor of China is seen as the son of God, and whatever laws he writes down are basically the word of God. And every citizen of China is expected to follow these rules, these laws, as if they are the word of God. That is the doctrine of legalism. Confucianism is slightly softer. So over the past 2,000 years, China has been ruled by a combination, mix and match of legalism and Confucianism. China has never been ruled in a Buddhist manner, in a dharmic manner. That's why China is administratively and politically a very, very different country from India. Its entire political doctrine is very different. So communism essentially is not that alien to China because China has always been an authoritarian country for its own people and for the others. So communism is essentially nothing but a continuation of that. So the Chinese Communist Party is essentially a new imperial dynasty in China. The current emperor is Xi Jinping. He is now emperor for life. He has proclaimed himself president for life. Eventually, he will be overthrown by some political coup or whatever. Whenever it happens, a new emperor will come in place. So that is the true nature of China. None of the experts will tell you this, but this is what we are dealing with.
What I've read, this is my little understanding of geopolitics from a historical perspective. So basically, culture evolves over 1,000 years or 2,000 years or whatever. But there is this little underlying thing that every country will always turn to. And that underlying thing is a sense of identity, personality. Basically, every country, the way they govern things, the way they run things, has its own personality, which they will invariably always go back to. For example, Russia has the Tsars. Okay, the Tsars got taken away. Oh, wait, then you have Stalin. Oh, wait, now you have Putin. Similarly, America as a country now, America's formation as a country happened, 200, 300 years back?
That's it.
So it's run by business people, basically. Risk-taking business people.
Very insightful.
So, and that's why it is where it is. Because they're the entrepreneurs. They're like, yeah, whatever, we'll build.
Everything is a business.
Yeah.
Everything.
That's
War is a business.
That's in their genetics.
It is.
And that's what, and India, I have some perception of India. I'd love to hear yours. Mine is that we're a collection of different cultures, but we're tied together by, again, what you said, dharma. Like that all of us are somewhat following the same thing. Indians in their core are very good, homely people. And I feel that that's what ties India together. Just before I let you highlight something, let's compare that to China. China from ancient times has dealt with things like civil war. They fight amongst each other. There's one dude at the top who said, listen to me, because I'm the most powerful guy. Now, what a lot of modern day historians also believe is that every country is going to go back to the original format of ruling things invariably. Now, I'd love to hear what you have to say about India, and I'd love to hear if I was correct in saying all.
India has always been an extremely diverse place with a lot of localized cultures and localized languages and localized many ethnic groups. And yet, it has had one characteristic is that it has always been unified by a single overarching culture and a single overarching language, which historically was Sanskrit. Sanskrit has been wiped out only in the past 100 years.
100.
That's it. Until the 19th century, Sanskrit was taught in every single Indian educational institution. It's only in the past 100 years that it has been artificially banned, essentially.
And is it likely that Hindi will take its place now?
Maybe. But Hindi is nothing compared to Sanskrit. Okay, Sanskrit is a very high language. It is possibly the most perfect language. There is something called a context-free grammar. If I take an English sentence and I jumble the words around, it makes no sense whatsoever. If I take a sentence in Panini Sanskrit and I jumble the words around, it will not change its meaning. It will only have one single unambiguous meaning. Okay, the placing of the words may not be entirely correct, but the meaning will never change. You will still know what it means. So this is the sort of thing that makes Sanskrit perfect for programming, coding, logic, mathematics, enhancing your mind and all those things. So that is something that has bound together always for the past 10,000 years almost. And the other thing is the culture. I mean, you may be in Bengal, you may be in Gujarat. Bengali has Durga Puja 9 days. Gujarat has Navratri 9 days. It's the same goddess, different ways of celebrating her. And same goes for every other part of India. The manifestations are very localized and very different, but it is still the same concepts, the same divinity, the same religion, the same culture. So that is what unifies India. That is what makes India a civilization and not a nation state. There are certain characteristics of a civilization. One is that it has a single overarching culture, a single overarching language. Its institutions are rooted in its own cultural values. And it has a powerful economy, good prosperity, good standard of living, and it has a military sphere of influence that extends beyond its stated borders. So this is what India has been historically. In 1947, India ceased to be a civilization. India was reduced to a mere nation state in 1947. Today, China is trying to become a civilization again under the aegis of the Chinese Communist Party. India is still governed by Western laws, Western constitution. We still speak English. We are more comfortable speaking English than Hindi. Me as well as you. At least I would speak for myself.
No, for sure.
So I am just as mentally colonized as everybody else. And this is an enormous barrier we are facing. You learn best in your mother tongue. You learn anything best in your mother tongue. And yet we are forced to first learn a foreign language and then learn things through that. Can you imagine the mental trauma that we go through unknowingly? So these are some of the obstacles that we have placed upon ourselves. That's why India is still far behind China, because China understands what it means to be a civilization. It is trying to regain that civilizational status. India is not even aspiring to that. We are aspiring to be a satellite of the Western world. And for 70 years, India did not even know or pursue its national interest. For 70 years, Indian rulers did not want to pursue a national interest. They were interested in something else. So India has a lot of catching up to do in the world of geopolitics. Today, over the past 7 years or so, it has changed a lot. Policies have changed and things have changed. It is now becoming a more powerful country. It is now understanding what power is. But still, I would say that Indians, on a personal level, we don't understand what power is. Let me give you an example. American Indians, Indian Americans, Indian expatriates who have become American citizens, etc., are demographically the most prosperous group and most successful group in America. They have the highest median income, they have the highest levels of education, they have the highest success, and yet, as a community, they're invisible. If you watch Hollywood movies, do you see Indians there? You see Chinese everywhere. You see Asians everywhere. Politically, they have zero power. The Asian Americans have a certain political power. Let's say the Islamic Americans have a very strong political base in America. Indians have been in America for the past 50, 60, 70 years. They are a very strong, large community, and yet they have zero political power or any power of any kind. They cannot get laws to be passed. They cannot influence policy. They influence nothing. They have zero influence. So Indians don't understand what power is. And unless you understand power, you will not be a major player on the geopolitical scene.
I hope that there's some bad mofo out there who's listening to this conversation and thinking, I'm going to be the PM who'll bring in Sanskrit again. I'm going to be the PM who'll bring in the old school education system again. I'm going to be the PM who'll bring back Indian civilization on a world stage. And if there isn't anyone like that watching, I'm going to be the bad mofo who'll bring it back. No, but I really hope that one of the listeners or viewers brings it back, sir. But I got to bring you back to that world stage, the international stage. What's happening in the world right now? And let's begin with how the world is perceiving India. I know that economically, from a business perspective, everyone's like, yo, big population, starting to earn money. The rest of the world is outsourcing a lot of their services to India. Now, whether that is IT services or even creative services, which have begun to be outsourced, like our editors, our Photoshop professionals, all these guys are now creating and exporting it to Europe and America and hopefully eventually the rest of the world. So we're earning money. The population is becoming richer. The spending power is increasing. Is the world looking at India and saying, now I want to sell my stuff there? And what else?
Essentially, the world is looking at India as a great big country full of digital coolies. We exchange our time and labor for a little bit of money, and the intellectual property, the ownership, stays with the West. Let's say you have a studio which is good in graphics design and all that. We are making special effects for Hollywood, but they are making the money out of it. We are just getting a small piece of it. We are getting a salary. They are making the big profits. We are exchanging our time, energy, labor, etc. for a little bit of money, and we are building the West. We are building it. So the climate in India is not right as of now for entrepreneurship, for people to create their own ideas and all. Don't you think there are hundreds of Elon Musks, potential Elon Musks, Bill Gates, etc. in India? India has the best brains in the world, but they are not allowed they are not unshackled and set free. Because let's say I have a great idea and I want to create the next Google or next Facebook. Where will I get the resources for that? Where will I get the capital for that? And even if I do something, it's more likely that people will come and stop me than let me achieve my full potential. And that goes for any industry, especially the digital industries and anything else. So India needs to create the climate and the environment and the ecosystem which will completely unshackle and free its people and let them achieve their full potential. Hopefully it will happen. Maybe it's in process, but we have still not reached there.
It'll happen when entrepreneurs enter politics.
Maybe, hopefully, yes.
That's what I strongly believe, because I feel like America's core is entrepreneurial, and that's why they are where they are.
Yeah.
They perceive everything from an entrepreneurial spirit. If someone succeeds in America, the narrative is never, why is that person succeeding? Oh no, but these are the flaws in that person. Why are y'all liking that person? I want to pull that person down. Those are the narratives in India. That whole theory about, have you heard of the theory of the crab shop? Basically, the theory says that there were crabs brought from different countries, and each country's crabs were put into different baskets. Mm-hmm. Okay? And one of the baskets was left open. So a customer enters the shop and asks the shopkeeper, why have you left that box open? Won't you see crab, won't some of the crabs escape? And he says, oh, that box? No, don't worry about that box. That's
Indian crab.
Yeah, that's the Indian crab box. If one guy tries going out, the other ones pull it down.
Okay.
That's a bad mentality. Probably of the last 100 years. I'm not saying it's cultural. It's just of the last 100 years.
It's because of the circumstances of the past 70 years. Because it's always been over the past 70 years, the government and the bureaucrats, etc., have imposed an artificial culture of scarcity. So you have to stand in line for hours for a simple thing.
Yeah.
So then you have to do some jugaad and get ahead of the others.
Yeah.
So that's why it has become like this. Indians are culturally very different. Indians who live in other countries never behave like this. It's only in India. So it's not a cultural trait. It's because of the circumstances.
Social manipulation.
Yeah, that's
Social engineering. Contrary to the American crab basket, America, the culture is if someone does well, if there's a Michael Jordan, if there is a Jeff Bezos, you say, that guy killed it, we're going to take inspiration from him.
Yes.
Even if Jeff Bezos is your closest competitor, you'll never look at him as, I'm going to bring him down. That happens in India. It happens so much on YouTube. If someone's doing well, other YouTubers want to pull them down.
Really?
But it never happens in America.
Yeah.
Like where they look at other YouTubers, nobody makes diss videos. Nobody makes, oh, this one's doing this wrong. People make things like, okay, that's what we can learn from them. People take inspiration in America. I think that's a highlight of American culture. And there's a lot of narratives about America haters. Lots of people want America to kind of drown because everyone wants to see the top dog losing. When you were a kid and you were watching WWE, WWF, you saw the champion. If the champion's a champion for too long, you get bored seeing that person.
True, yes.
So, same with sports. You don't want to see Mumbai Indians win every IPL season. So people want America to lose without understanding that all these futuristic technologies we speak of, artificial intelligence, biohacking are all being developed in Silicon Valley, in San Francisco, in California, in America. So even the next wave of money is going to go there because that's the entrepreneurial part of the world. And unless India changes, have you heard of this? That many startups, when they incorporate in India, they choose
Singapore.
Yeah, they choose Singapore.
Precisely.
What is this logic? Explain this logic and then
Well, in India, there are lots of unspoken taxes and things like that. So once you become successful, once you come in the public eye, you will have to shell out more, underhand, etc. I'm just speculating. I'm not naming anybody. But these are some of the problems which make it impossible for you to run a successful, profitable business in this country. And that's why it's always safer if you incorporate your company in Singapore or somewhere else offshore and then do business here.
Yeah, I believe Flipkart's also incorporated in Singapore.
Yes.
And many of the big ones you hear of, many of them are incorporated in Singapore for
Isn't that a
reason.
crying shame?
Yeah.
So these are the things that are holding this country back. It's all artificial. We need to unchain this country and unleash the full potential of these people. Look at the Chinese. They are copying the American system. They are creating Silicon Valleys in China, lots of them. Why can't we have our own Silicon Valleys here? It's not like we don't have enough people. It's not like our people are stupid. We have the best people who are working over there in Silicon Valley, and they are building Silicon Valley there. Look at all the CEOs, all the tech CEOs, Satya Nadella, Sundar Pichai, etc. And there are so many small entrepreneurs also, medium size and all that. Silicon Valley is run by India, it's staffed by Indians, and yet it's American. So imagine all those brains if they were to come back to India, or if the future brain drain prospects would not go there and instead do something here and create things over here. This country would be changed overnight within 20 years, within a single generation.
I also think Indians have a very low sense of self-worth on an average. Like they think, oh no, our country is not good enough, things like that. But again, that's social engineering that's happened because of British Raj for 200 years. Our textbooks were changed. Our systems were changed. Our systems were basically, imagine that we were slaves. The British had put chains around our neck. But when they removed the chains, they also cut off some fingers. They said that, now just go do your thing. That's what's happening. And over the last 100 years, we have to grow back those fingers.
Absolutely.
Through podcasts. I hope. But what do you have to say about that? So in terms of social engineering, just to highlight some examples. We just finished a great Hindi podcast where we highlighted social engineering. Just some examples of how social engineering has kind of affected this country.
So social engineering is changing how you perceive yourself as an individual and as a society. So that is done using influential triggers, your textbooks, what you study in school, the media and the narrative that they put forth, and things like that. So India essentially sees itself through British eyes only today. Even though the British have left 70 years ago, their structures, the structures they put in place, the institutions they put in place, the textbooks they put in place, the bureaucracy they put in place, everything is still in place. Nothing has changed. Even our constitution is a foreign constitution. It is copy-pasted from various places in the West. Our laws are still the British laws with some little embellishments here and there, which we have added later on. So we are still run as a country as if the British were still ruling us. And because of this Indians have a very low sense of self-worth. They don't know their true history, how great this civilization actually is. And unless you have a sense of self-worth, you will not have the confidence to take on the world. And that's what you see in Indians everywhere. I've seen Indians who go abroad and they are like, oh my goodness, everybody is greater than me, everybody is better, etc. And it takes time for you to overcome that and realize that, hey, no, I mean, I'm not different from them.
Yeah.
I may actually be better than them.
We see this in our families. You see some relatives who says, India mein kya pada hai? Statements like that thrown around very casually. There's nothing here for your career. There's nothing here for your future. It's not true.
It's not true at all.
Lots of opportunity here, which, your parents don't tell you, your relatives don't tell you. I've seen so much of that. I think on a very personal level, as a 22-year-old, I had to overcome all that. Like lots of relatives tell me not to stay here anymore. I'm like, no, wait, there is something here. I feel like you guys don't know. And it was the correct call. You unengineer yourself. You unlearn a lot of shit.
Absolutely.
And I don't blame those two generations because they were brought
No,
up
it's
in a
not their
certain
fault.
way.
It's not their fault.
Which year were you born in?
76.
76. So you've seen the 80s.
I have seen the 80s. I have seen the Doordarshan era and all that. So
Yeah.
I know how bad it was. Yeah. There was a time when India was like North Korea. We did not know anything that's happening outside the country. Now, I had the advantage of growing up for a few years in Europe. So I saw a whole different world. And when I came back to India, I was appalled at the condition of this country. So I was there during a few years of my formative time as a child. So when I came to India, I had a different perspective, and I was appalled to see the condition this country is in. It's all imposed artificially. So now things are changing. I think everything is changing. You are a great sports fan. You've seen cricket, right? So in the 90s, Indian cricketers were so diffident. They lacked self-confidence. Today's Indian cricketers are a whole different breed. They will steamroll even the Australians. The attitude has changed. Even the physicality has changed. Indians could not bowl fast until the 2000s.
And with the best fast bowling unit.
And today we have a whole bunch of fast bowlers who are tearing at the leash. So India has changed beyond belief, but it has still a long way to go. And we need to empower the people of this country. This country has unlimited energy and potential. So I see a great future for India, provided the right policies are implemented.
Do you see that happening?
It's happening a little slowly. See, there are two kinds of modes of change in a country: reforms or revolution. Reforms happen gradually, step by step. It's placed one thing at a time. It's a phased deployment. Revolutions are overnight, but revolutions are explosive, they are violent, and they often cause much more damage than the good they do. So I do not want a revolution in this country. I want good, rapid, focused change. And that will happen when you first reform the institutions like the bureaucracy, etc., who impede change at every cost. The bureaucracy is an institution that resists change at any cost at all. It doesn't want change. It wants inertia. It wants things to stay the same. And in this country today, a bureaucrat has a job for life. An educationist has a job for life. Once you're a government employee, nobody can ever fire you. That is ridiculous. So it leaves no space for performers. There is no merit. You are given promotions based on your seniority, not based on your performance. And India has one of the smallest diplomatic corps in the world. India has a sum total of 1,700 diplomats. Singapore has more diplomats than India. How will you engage with the world as a major power with this minuscule diplomatic corps? So India needs to start thinking differently. It needs to start thinking big. It needs to see itself as a major player on the world stage. Our economy is already at a very significant stature. We are among the top 5 economies in the world. But we are obsessed with soft power, and we ignore hard power to our peril.
What is this soft power, hard power?
That's a good question. So let's say you have 1 million followers or 1 million subscribers on YouTube. They like you. They watch your content. When you say something, they take it seriously, or they at least consider it seriously, and then they decide whether they like it or not. So when you say something, you have some stature and you have some influence. That is soft power. What is hard power? I have 100 well-trained, heavily armed soldiers. They will obey me unquestioningly without a second's delay. That is hard power. Soft power is soft influence. Hard power is immediate, decisive, kinetic action.
Missiles.
All that. So a significantly large country, a player on the global stage, needs to have a good combination of hard power and soft power.
And right
India
now-
is obsessed with soft power, soft power, soft power. India is not building up its hard power the way it should.
What is India's versions of soft power?
Culture. We talk about culture. We will have cultural exchanges here and there, and our cultural ministry will do this or that. Our Sangeet Natak Academy will do some small stage performance.
Think of exporting food. Think of exporting minerals.
Yoga. Let the West take our yoga and make it convert it into dog yoga and goat yoga and drunk yoga and hot yoga and all that. So all our culture is being expropriated and all, but we are not developing the hard power that will truly earn us respect in the world's eyes. China doesn't respect soft power. China respects hard power. After what happened in Galwan, China sees India differently. Because we fought back, we killed more than they killed ours. So you need to have teeth. You need to have your teeth and you need to show them and bite if required.
And I think maybe being the nice guy fucked us up in the past.
We've been too nice for too long. I'm not saying we should not be nice. Be nice to whoever is nice to you. But when it comes to bullies, you need to bully them 10 times back.
Do no harm, take no
Absolutely.
That's the rule of life.
Yes.
Let's talk about America, sir. What do you think America is thinking for the next 10, 20 years? Or are they just chilled out? Or are they looking at China and saying, who are you?
I fear that America may be in terminal decline. I truly fear that.
Expand on this.
America has changed a lot culturally. Its entire education system has gone to the left. There is a lot of socialistic thinking now among the American people, especially the younger generations who have come through the education system. So they no longer think about capitalism. They think capitalism is evil. They think getting rich is evil, just like Indians used to think until now. And they want to open up the borders. They want to let immigrants in.
Do you feel India is becoming more capitalistic?
India is at least shedding its socialistic thinking, because until the 1990s or 2000s, Indians used to think that being rich is a sin. If you are rich, you must have done something bad, something wrong. There was the thinking, the mentality, the attitude of Indians.
It's still there.
It's still there, but it's less now. I've seen it. It's still there. True, very true.
Like, I mean, I've had like business associates say, no, I don't want to earn money beyond a certain
Good God.
point. I'm like, dude, earning a lot of money is not bad.
It's not a bad thing.
You can help people.
You're not stealing money, you're making money. You're creating jobs, aren't you? So it's a whole different mindset. But at least some Indians now are embracing that mindset. In the United States, the reverse is happening. It's all anti-progress. I mean, it's terrible what I'm seeing. The country is going to the dogs, I get the feeling. You look at downtown Los Angeles, it's all boarded up. The businesses are shut. You have so many homeless people. It's going from bad to worse. They want to open up the borders and get in certain kinds of immigrants into the country to change the demographics and change the voting patterns. And America no longer seems to aspire to be a superpower. It's ceding so much space to the Chinese. For example, the Chinese are expanding mightily in Asia, their spheres of influence. It is even possible that sometime in the next 10 years, they will gobble up Taiwan. And if they do, the Americans won't fight back. I get the feeling. So I see that the world undergoing a significant realignment right now. The Chinese and the Russians are teaming up temporarily. Okay. I have a colleague who calls this the Dragon Bear Alliance. So they want to essentially take over the space that the Americans are ceding. Power abhors vacuum. When there is a lack of leadership, lack of power, somebody else will come and take over that space. And that's happening slowly, steadily, but very quickly in geopolitical terms. In geopolitical terms, 10, 20 years is not a big deal. But we are seeing a massive change in the past 10 years, and it's going to accelerate in the next 10 years. So it is possible that in the next 10 years, China may be a formidable superpower, and Russia may also be somewhere in that league, or at least in alliance with them. And it is for India to decide now where its future is going to lie. I am not suggesting for a second that India should go into the Chinese orbit. Absolutely not. We are completely different from them. What I would like to see is that India should rise on its own, in its own right, as a independent power center. One that will provide balance and something good to the world. Because the Chinese essentially want to replace America as the global hegemon. They want to eat up everything. They want to take over all the fishing areas, everything, and they are destroying the environment. They are the effect they are having on the environment is terrible. They have these enormous fishing fleets that go everywhere. They suck up millions of tons of fish out of the ocean, and it's creating an economic and environmental catastrophe. There is no sustainability built into this thinking. So India, I would say, should provide a counterweight, not just militarily and economically to China, but also in the way we think about the environment, and essentially a good counterpoint, something that is good for the world in the long run.
Yeah. You know, let's bring in history again. China has had a history of civil war. Do you see civil war happening again in, say, the next 10, 20 years in China? And do you think that maybe they could implode?
I do not see China imploding in the next 10, 20 years. The 100th anniversary of the coming to power of the Communist Party is in 2049. 2049. They came to power in 1949. So the Chinese have plans. They plan to become the global superpower by that time. And they have processes in motion right now, which they hope will lead them to that position. So the single focus of the Chinese Communist Party is that. And it is all powerful within China. It is becoming all powerful outside as well in its external sphere of influence. So at this point of time, I do not preclude the possibility of a coup or takeover by a different leader within the Chinese Communist Party. But I do not see the Chinese Communist Party itself falling out of power. That is extremely unlikely. I may be wrong. I am not a fortune seer. But statistically, I think it's extremely unlikely.
You know, they say that geopolitics has an application in your everyday life. Like you see countries doing and you learn how to control people as well. You know what to do in social situations. So what can the world learn from China?
Well, what you can learn from China is how to expand, what the Chinese did. Let's look at the past 100 years of history. The Chinese had a terrible civil war after the Second World War, or even during that. There was this party led by Chiang Kai-shek, which was essentially dominant in China. And the communists under Mao Zedong, they fought them. And eventually, after a long, protracted guerrilla warfare battle and all that, the long march and all those things, Mao Zedong emerged victorious, and the Chinese Communist Party took over China. And step by step, they engineered the society to reflect their mindset, their values, and their attitudes. So everybody had to compulsorily become a member of the Chinese Communist Party. The so-called bourgeoisie was purged, eliminated, wiped out. During Mao Zedong's tenure as the leader of China, approximately
Could you explain the word bourgeoisie?
The bourgeoisie are the evil people, the ones who are rich. See, in India, we have this mindset that being rich is a sin, right? That is a communist, Marxist mindset. Socialism is soft communism. India is supposedly a secular socialist republic, right? Socialism is a form of that mindset. So, the bourgeoisie are the rich, the ones who have become rich by whatever means. So, if traditionally you had a good occupation or whatever and you were rich, then when the communists take over, they're going to shoot you up. They're going to line you up against the wall and shoot you because you are the bourgeoisie. You have earned money, that's why you're evil. So entire sections of society were wiped out by Mao Zedong. There was the great leap forward. There was a great cultural revolution. And during Mao's lifetime, the total death toll within his own country, of his own people, was about 70 to 80 million minimum. That is a ridiculous amount of deaths. And the suffering was unimaginable. So the Chinese entirely changed the culture of China. The Chinese Communist Party changed the culture of China, the demographics of China. Do you know today in China, every person, take any individual in China, he or she has no aunts, no uncles, no cousins, nothing, no siblings. Everybody is all alone.
Because one child
policy. Can you imagine that? No cousins, no siblings, no aunts, no uncles.
So that in terms of culture and society, that must be making you self-centered.
Seriously, it warps your entire thinking, your entire mindset. You become entirely selfish, entirely self-centered. And that's the attitude you see among the Chinese. Just observe the behavior of Chinese tourists outside China and see how they behave. They are notorious for bad behavior. And the entire policies of China today are self-centered. They want to destroy the world, take over the world, and make China the middle kingdom, the center of the world. So that is what's going on. I don't think there's anything good to learn from China, unfortunately. Historically, China has been a great civilization, but right now it's frightening.
Yeah, when you read about Lao Tzu or even Confucius, there's so many applications of that in modern day life. But that's not what this podcast is about. Coming back to China, and even with COVID happening, I think honestly, layman's terms, the whole world is pissed off with China. What did you do to the world? So, I mean, going forward, if there's a war, do you think Russia and China will become allies? Or do you think there will be a big war? Will we see a World War III?
I think if a World War III is fought, it will be fought with non-kinetic weapons.
Cyber warfare.
Cyber warfare, artificial intelligence, all those things. If China does go to war with some country, and if it loses, then the Chinese Communist Party will implode. That is the only one scenario in which I see the Chinese Communist Party going out of power, because the public will rise up against it if it loses.
Let me give some kind of examples of cyber warfare techniques. And so I'm sure you know your own version of cyber warfare. This is something I picked up from reading recently. Basically, cyber warfare would be that rather than sending soldiers to the battlefield and say, okay, now fight each other, or planes and tanks, you have hackers in, say, your country versus hackers in another country. Now, your country's hackers can actually target that country's subway system and make trains crash against each other. They can make power lines go off.
Air traffic control systems disappear.
Yeah. You can make their social media get affected, so everyone thinks in a certain way. This is what happens during cyber warfare. And this is thoda long run. People say that many forms of cyber warfare are already happening.
Absolutely. You will not even know about it.
Yeah.
Today, it's possible to take over a country's entire governance system without the public realizing anything has even happened. It's possible today. It's possible to make entire cities go blackout. It's possible to crash stock markets. It's possible to jumble up your army's communication systems. It's possible to just have your satellites die in space.
Steal money.
Yeah, you can empty entire banks. It's possible to do all kinds of things because the entire world has moved online. So online is where the next domain of warfare is. And China has been investing in that heavily. Much of the technological progress they have done over the past 20, 30 years has been through hacking. They've stolen so many American state secrets, military secrets. The Chinese fighter planes are essentially copies of American fighter planes. They look very similar. They fly similar. So they have stolen a lot of technology from the Americans, and the Americans have just let it happen.
So, you spoke about this one-child policy affecting mindset. In the same way, do you believe that excesses have affected the American mindset, where excesses and putting shit inside your body maybe drives you crazy and you start focusing on the negative things in life? Like, I'll give you the example, right? I've taken a policy on BeerBiceps Media, which is my parent organization, not to hire as far as possible from tier 1 cities. When we hire from outside of tier 1, your Banarases of the world, MPs of the world, Bengal, places like that, we get our best talent, most dedicated talent. At the most, we'll look at an engineering college somewhere here and also then go inside and ask them, okay, where are you from? Ideally, we don't want kids from urban centers. It used to be ulta.
Yes.
Okay, like earlier, I only wanted my urban kids. And I'm not saying all of them. There's a lot of gems out there even in urban India. Especially urban India needs to turn away from the West, look within a little bit.
I could not agree more about that. The West has lost its bearings. The West has lost its moorings. There used to be a culture in the West. Today, America has ruined that, unfortunately. Today, the Americans think that emotions are just a bunch of chemical reactions. If I'm feeling a certain way, I should take a certain drug or certain chemical, and it'll change me. It'll fix me.
Yeah.
How long will that fix last? You'll need a new fix in some time. So they are all dependent on drugs, unfortunately. I mean, look at the epidemic of drug abuse in the US. Good God. The opioid epidemic, they call it.
Yeah,
and that's just one aspect of what's wrong with the American society. So America is not the role model we should look at. Anymore. It was. In the 1960s, 70s, 80s, America was something to look up to.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, it was a very different country. Today, it has lost its bearing. It has the wrong agendas. It looks like the wrong preoccupations. And the entire context of the American society is very different from our context. So it is not right, or it is not fruitful for us to try to emulate that and force fit those preoccupations into our society. We need to find our own problems. It's not like every single society has problems, no doubt about it. So we have to understand our own problems through our own intelligence and not trying to compare them with something else. And of course, we need to progress, we need to evolve, we need to get better. So that needs to happen from within, not from without.
Yeah. Like, look within, see what's wrong with you rather than complaining about the world around you.
Absolutely.
Because the world is always going to be full of bullshit. And when you change what's inside, is where you can at least get that strength to begin changing things in the world. But first, look within. And urban India is a lot of urban India. The highly urbanized sections have lost that ability to look within. They don't give a about physical health or mental health and, kind of look outward. No, that issue is pertinent. Oh, how can you live in our country? Oh, this one's doing it bad. Oh, the government is bad. Oh, this is also bad. This YouTuber's talking shit. Social media's shit. Just complaining.
Complaining, yes. Whining.
Look within and take action. That's what I believe. Before we get to the Twitterverse section where we'll take questions from Twitter, my final question is about, I think, the three places we haven't spoken about. Australia and the Pacific. I don't know if that's really important when you're talking about geopolitics because it's a small population. What about Europe and Africa? Because I read a lot about business opportunities in both. Not just like you'd assume that the big business opportunities are in Africa because Europe is saturated. Apparently, even Europe has its own big business opportunities. But from a geopolitical standpoint, what are their roles in this whole game? And maybe even South America, if you want to highlight it.
So geopolitically, most of Europe is essentially in the Western orbit, in the American orbit.
Okay.
So UK is essentially an American satellite today.
Okay.
And the so-called liberal democracies of Europe are also more or less American satellites. Germany is trying to push back. They're trying to have some alliances with Russia, especially when it comes to trade with respect to gas and all that. So Russia is constructing a pipeline right now through the Black Sea, I believe. It's called Nord Stream 2. The Americans are really pissed off about that. They don't want the Germans to use Russian gas. So there's a tug of war happening over there. The Germans want Russian gas and Russian resources. So Putin is making his power plays. So there's a lot of things going on over there. Right now, as we speak, there is a potential flashpoint of conflict brewing in the Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine obviously is propped up by the United States and other countries. So it's a proxy for a US-Russia conflict, which is happening right now.
Like, I believe in 2014, Putin had Russian forces invade
Crimea.
Right? Which is a part of Ukraine, and Ukraine couldn't do anything about it.
Well, Crimea was historically a Russian region. During the USSR days, it was placed within the Ukrainian administrative territory, purely for administrative purposes. After the Soviet Union broke up and all the republics declared independence, Crimea somehow stayed with Ukraine. So all Putin did was take back what he believes, in his opinion, I'm not taking sides, in his opinion, is Russian territory. So that is his logic and his explanation of what he did. Now, who's right, who's wrong, I'm not judging, I'm just telling you what happened. So there's a lot going on over there in that region, in the Caucasus region. Turkey is emerging as a big geopolitical power. They are playing both sides, America and Russia. And there's a whole lot of BS going on in the Middle East, as always. Conflict.
Like amongst each other.
That's the perpetual story over there for the past 100 years at least.
Again, you study history, right? Like what's been happening for decades will keep happening. Cycles will repeat themselves. I got to bring this back to India as an Indian podcast. Like whatever is happening in the world, how are Russia, America, China looking at India? Does everyone want us on their side? And do you think India will emerge as that educative superpower again, for lack of a better word? Because that's what we were. We were like the teachers of the world.
We like to use the word Vishwaguru. Right. India is not really taken very seriously right now in the geopolitical domain. It's a big market. It's a big economy. But does it have the ability or rather the willingness to change things around? To impose its will outside its borders. Thus far, we have not done much about that. Now, in the geopolitical world, it's all about hard power. It's how much you can influence and affect the world. It's how much risk you're willing to take and how far will you extend your reach. So India has always been, for the past 70 years, isolated within its own boundaries. We say that the Indian Ocean region is our strategic backyard, but we haven't developed a navy that can take possession of the Indian Ocean region. Even today, Sri Lankan Navy arrests our fishermen and sinks their boats. So even a little country like Sri Lanka can kind of bully us around. So India needs to develop its hard power. Until that, it will not be taken seriously. India is taken seriously as an economic power, but not as a hard military power.
Wow. And, by which year do you believe that India will be counted as a superpower? Because I assume that when you're using the word superpower, you're taking in the facet of economic power, you're taking the facet of geopolitical, military power.
Comprehensive national power.
Yeah, comprehensive national.
I would say India has 10 years to get its act together. Otherwise, China will swamp everything.
What's the worst case scenario for us as a country?
Break up. Fragmentation.
Like Gujarat will be its own country.
Precisely. That's what China's end game is. China wants a disunited states of India. China wants independent countries, a bunch of independent
Which
countries.
is also a historical possibility. Which is what went wrong, which is why we couldn't defend ourselves against the invaders. And this is also a possibility.
Well, today we are a single political entity, but we are still at war with each other. We are fighting and bickering amongst each other all the time. North versus South, East versus West.
This religion versus that religion.
Exactly. It's all just going on, and it's being fomented by various forces from various places. So we need to get our act together in a variety of ways, and we've got about maximum 10 years to do that.
Like in the 20s, we'll know where life is going.
Yeah.
So say that fragmentation happens, or we're attacked with a war. Do you see a lot of upper class Indians leaving the country?
Yeah. Rats will leave the sinking ship, right?
Okay. The first question is from Yash Watwani at Watwani World. The question is, a government's thinking about universal basic income. So I'd love for you to explain to the listeners what that even means, and then you can talk about it from a government's perspective.
So universal basic income is like a social security umbrella or a parachute that if you fall upon hard times, the government... So essentially the government gives everybody a monthly income, irrespective of who you are, how old you are, whether you're working or not, a certain amount of money per month. So what that does is that if somebody falls upon hard times, they still have the dignity of life and they have a place to stay and they can sustain themselves. Now, this has pros and cons. First of all, you have to levy taxes to raise this money. Secondly, it will disincentivize many people from working hard, right? So it's kind of a socialistic, communistic policy. If you look at historically how India was, India did not ever have universal basic income, but it did have a very strong social security umbrella. So only in case you fell upon hard times, your community, your extended family, your village, your town would take care of you. You would never starve to death. So I would say that instead of a UBI, universal basic income, we need to have a strong social security net. Only when somebody really needs it, they should get social security. Nobody should have to beg on the streets. There should be no homeless people. Everybody should have, as Indian citizens, the right to a dignified life and the right to being taken care of if in case they are unable to take care of themselves.
Another interesting question from Fluky Hermit at Upendra1. How's the rise of Bitcoin going to affect world banks? Are we going to witness a ban on cryptocurrencies? Actually, I'd love to hear your opinion on how crypto is going to affect governments, because for anyone who doesn't know about crypto, we've done some beautiful episodes about cryptocurrencies. But the highlight from there is that if crypto actually kind of goes mainstream, it will change the way governments are functioning, because tomorrow I can sit in Bombay and earn money by outsourcing my services or my product to Los Angeles, and the government won't come to know how much I'm earning, how I've earned, all that. So I mean, that's just one small aspect of how crypto will affect governments. Basically, right now what happens if I'm sitting here and trying to earn money from there, then money goes through the government, because the government's able to track. And that's the whole aspect of blockchain coming in and changing the world, because no one can track exactly what you're doing on blockchain. I also want to highlight one more thing about blockchain before I let you continue. I was with some HNIs recently who spoke about how they're converting a lot of black money, and generally people with a lot of black money are converting their money
to Bitcoin.
Yes. So I wish to ask you about this as well.
So Bitcoin definitely has the potential to entirely, completely change the way people do business, the way people earn money, the way financial transactions happen. And it completely removes the government, any state agency from the loop, like you just said. So it has the potential to empower people, to free people. You won't have to pay taxes anymore unless you declare the income, etc. It also has the potential for a lot of criminal activity, because you can charge for crimes, etc., and things like that. So it has pros and cons. Now, I would say that I've heard in the news that India is planning to ban Bitcoin. I would say it's a bad move. India should regulate Bitcoin. Maybe India should create its own digital currency, a digital rupee, and explore that as an option. But you have to embrace the future. The future is blockchain. Yes. The future is Bitcoin and various forms of cryptocurrency.
This is exactly like North Korea not embracing social media. Like it's
Clearly,
the same thing.
Same kind of thing.
That's how the world is progressing. The world is embracing crypto. India's got to embrace it.
So
as
India
well.
should not have this defensive mindset, this reactive mindset. We have to embrace the future, and we have to proactively take steps so that it is not used in a bad way.
You know, this is what makes me think a lot about when politicians are criticized. I'm not defending or criticizing any politician here, but I feel they're from that generation which was brought up with that socially engineered mentality of slightly inferiority complex. Therefore, they want more. Therefore, there's jealousy. Therefore, there is like this whole concept of no, I'll bring you down. And, you know, everything is too outward. My hope is that when the younger generation kind of takes over, when people your age take over, people born in the mid 70s take over, things will change. Because I feel like your generation, like I compared to my own parents' generation, which is born in the 60s, they're very different from you. I don't know why, but this is what I've observed for sure. You guys are a little more modern, and your upbringing of your kids is also different.
Yes.
So
true.
kids are, obviously the kids are to something else, they are another animal. But you guys have also gone through something. Maybe you all were really young when the economy opened up in the early 90s.
Yes, true.
Probably that was your big cultural shift. You know what my generation's big cultural shift is?
What is that?
COVID.
COVID, yeah, oh no. Yeah.
We started caring about the environment and all more. So
Yes.
for at least that's the chatter I hear. People know the value of the environment now.
I see.
We always did in theory, but now we know it in practical.
In real life.
Yeah. Like this whole thing about the, you know, what's it called? Like just the meat industry, the fishing industry.
Absolutely.
All
yes.
these industries might actually kind of start, I won't say vanishing, but they'll definitely go down. Factory farming, all these things.
One hopes so. I am all for sustainable businesses, sustainable agriculture, but not exploitative things.
Lots of questions about the COVID crisis. So very quickly, Mugdha at Mugdha_07 asks, what's your take on the origins of COVID?
Well, the origins of COVID are clearly kept under wraps. I think, well, there are different theories, and I would tend to believe that either it was an accidental release or an engineered release by China. But we will not know until many years later. I think there's clearly some sort of foul play.
You think it's bioweapons?
It's a possibility. The Chinese have a bioweapons program. When the Ebola outbreak happened in about 10 years ago, they sent their scientists ostensibly to provide aid to the affected people. But the true reason was to get samples of the virus.
Oh God.
So wherever there is some new outbreak, the Chinese send scientists and doctors over there. The main purpose is to get samples, and then they can play around with those.
Again, speaking to your inner physicist who also has a spiritual side, do you believe that countries have karma and it comes back to bite them?
It does.
And in your lifetime, what do you think will happen if a country is doing so much shit? Because China is doing bad shit on a worldwide scale. And this is not me creating a narrative. This is what most of the people we've had on the podcast have said. And these are some of the smartest people I've ever met in my life, the most qualified people. What's your take?
See, I do not wish anything bad to the Chinese people. The Chinese people are innocent victims. I have known many Chinese people. They're all nice people individually. It is this government and this communist party which is intent on ruining the world. I hope that China will see a transition to a better form of government. China should follow its own system. I'm not saying they should embrace democracy or some Western system. Maybe they should have a benevolent emperor like they used to have in the past. So they should embrace their own culture, their own past, and hopefully something less oppressive and less evil than the Chinese Communist Party. I don't wish anything bad on the Chinese people. I don't want them to suffer.
You know, with everything that's happening, if this actually was a bioengineered virus, which has caused so much death, misery, chaos all over the world. So say let's actually kind of delve deep into this conspiracy theory as the last part of this podcast. What would be the intention of China by releasing a virus like this, which changes up economies all over the world? It changes up behavioral patterns. What's in it for them? And what actually happened on like a very macro scale, if you can highlight?
Well, one of the first impacts was on the 2020 US presidential election. The incumbent was kicked out of office.
Caused instability.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the major factors was the COVID pandemic in the US. And Trump was perceived as not acting swiftly enough and decisively enough. The media may have created this perception, but whatever happened, Trump went out of power. Now, Trump was extremely anti-China. He was engaging in this entire trade war with the Chinese, and it was really hurting the Chinese. So if we were to believe this conspiracy theory, then the first impact was that it changed the outcome of the US presidential election. And some people call Mr. Biden Beijing Biden because he is more pro-China than Trump. So yeah, it's had a very good outcome for China that way.
Quickly, could you highlight aspects of the trade war that happened between Trump and China?
So essentially, Trump was imposing very high tariffs on certain Chinese items, the kind of items that China was dumping into the US for very low prices. So if you impose high tariffs, then the Chinese products will not be low priced, and so it will not be profitable to China for China to make money out of these exports. That is just one aspect of the trade war. He was influencing other countries also into go. For example, China-Australia relations have really deteriorated in the past 1 or 2 years. There is also a consequence of this entire activity. So the entire climate was becoming very, very anti-China, and that's what possibly China could have helped preclude by releasing a virus and changing the whole preoccupation of the world.
Like, as in, people were starting to hate on China, and they said, no, wait, just take this virus. Now you have your own problem to deal with.
And then nowadays, the Chinese are putting forward this theory that it's not really a Chinese virus, it's come from somewhere else. So then they can wash their hands of the responsibility for what happened.
But on an economic level, did it have other impacts? Like, did it,
Yes. So, for example, the entire world economy ground to a halt for many months. It's still not recovered. The Chinese economy is just chugging along because they don't give a damn about the death toll in China. We don't know how many deaths have happened in China. The figures have never been released beyond the first initial burst of cases. So we don't have any reliable statistics of the coronavirus cases and deaths in China. And it doesn't really matter because human life is cheap in China, at least for the Communist Party. So the Chinese economy is just chugging along happily, strong, and the rest of the world is down. So that gives China an enormous advantage in the long run.
Just this 1 or 2 year burst.
Absolutely.
And for, God knows, maybe it'll be like a 5-year burst. We don't know how long COVID is.
Yeah, we don't know that. Yeah, it's still going on.
Like in a big way.
In a big way, yeah.
Man. Is there anything else from a long-term perspective? Like, do you believe that there will be more viruses like this? Say if this was a bioweapon, do you believe that there could be more bioweapons that China could use to their advantage?
It is possible. The technology does exist. The research does exist. We can manipulate DNA. We can manipulate individual genes. So we can take two viruses and combine their characteristics. So the technology does exist. I am sure people are researching that. So yes, it is possible that it may happen in the future with a more deadly virus. The coronavirus has fortunately not been as deadly as we expected it to be. But in the future, what if you have an airborne strain of the Ebola virus? The Ebola virus has a 60 or 70% mortality rate. That would decimate the world if that were to happen, hypothetically. So the possibility is always there. It all depends on who's willing to do what. How far are you willing to go in your pursuit of global domination?
But how do you fight against this?
Well, you have to be prepared for all kinds of eventualities. It's like computer viruses. You have computer viruses and you have companies like Norton, Symantec, McAfee, etc., who develop defenses against all possible viruses, past, present, and future. So similarly, we know what kind of viruses are there in the biological domain. So we need to have companies or institutions or agencies which proactively try to develop vaccines and combat and defenses against potential future bioengineered viruses and all that.
Well, the final question is, in this chaotic new world that we're living in, where an entire generation has had its World War III in the form of COVID, what's your advice for two kinds of youth? Indian youth and international youth.
I would say that you need to empower yourself by learning about the world. And essentially what's happening right now is there's a lot of propaganda and disinformation. One of the terms that's thrown around is fake news. So the entire media today is essentially, it is either serving some political party or some agenda somewhere or something like that. So it's very hard to know what the truth is and what is lies. And today that's the biggest conundrum people are facing. There is a deluge of information, social media, everything is free for consumption, but you no longer know what is the truth. So people need to develop their ability to sense out what news is true, what news is fake, and the only way to do that is to learn history, so that you cannot say, so that if somebody is putting a certain version of something out, you will know that there is no cause and effect from historical precedent. If you do that, then you can make empowered choices and the right choices in your life. Otherwise, you're gonna just be sheep following the agenda of the hidden masters and whoever is running the world. Essentially, the problem is that the real power centers of the world are not necessarily part of the electoral process. There are power centers in every country that are outside the electoral process. These are quasi-permanent power centers, and they run the world behind the scenes. I'm not talking conspiracy theories there.
Not the Illuminati.
Not the Illuminati or anything, but there are certain power structures like that. So we need to be aware of all these things. And this is a message for Indian youth as well as foreign youth, everybody. We need to learn world history. You have to learn the history of the world and that of your own country and try to see the cause and effect chain. The most important thing about history is causality. There's a cause and effect chain. If something happens today, there is a reason why it's happening. There's a long cause and effect chain that goes back many years, sometimes centuries. If you can develop the ability to see this, then you will make the right choices in the world and you will not fall prey to misinformation and propaganda. So that is the most important quality we need to develop today, everybody.
Would you say stop consuming mainstream media or consume a buffet of mainstream media?
I would say consume a buffet. Because you need to know who's spouting what propaganda too. That also is important. So the best way to consume information is to consume it from a variety of sources and then try to fill in the blanks yourself and try to, using your own judgment and wisdom, try to understand what's really happening.
Abhijit Chavda, thank you for being on another episode of the Ranveer Show. I'll be linking all of your links down below. Please go follow. Please go subscribe to his YouTube channel as well. And guys, comment down below. We've covered historical topics. We've done physics. This is the first geopolitical podcast we've created. Hope you enjoyed it. This was our third episode with Mr. Abhijit Chavda. I'll also link the other two beautiful episodes we've created. Sir, this was a beautiful shoot day. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. It was a real great experience.
Likewise. Here's to many, 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 many more conversations.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. It was an eye-opener for me. I feel like if you want to actually absorb news, if you want to absorb what has happened in the last 20 years on a world stage, ask the people who've studied that side of things inside out. Don't just rely on the news you've watched on TV. Don't just rely on some random YouTube channels. Don't watch the stuff that's told to you. Get a lot of information sent to you, process it yourself, and then come up with your own conclusions. That was the big reason we spoke about geopolitics on this show for the first time. Of course, Abhijit Chavda is going to return on the Ranveer Show with a lot of other topics. We're going to talk about the universe, about history, and of course about geopolitics. Please comment down below. I want to know what you guys want to see us talk about. Remember guys, the Ranveer Show is now a Spotify exclusive. Follow us on Spotify. Every episode is available on Spotify 48 hours before it's available anywhere else in the world. Keep following. Lots of rich content coming your way.